Hi everyone, this is Margaret Manning with 60andMe. This is the place where women over 60 come to be inspired. My guest today is John Underwood. John lives in the UK. He is a businessman, an entrepreneur, and for many years has been working in an area that I think will be very intriguing to lots of women in our community. John is the founder of a phenomenon called Death Cafe. And this is a series of events where you can go and talk about your feelings and your concerns about dying. I'd like to welcome you here, John. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It is a very interesting topic. People might just be switching off now. Don't want to talk about that. But you were responsible for starting a movement, Death Cafe. And I understand you've now got events happening all over the world,
yeah.
and you know, thousands of people have attended them.
Yes.
And we've done another video briefly on the subject of Death Cafe and what it is. I encourage people to watch that. But what I'd like to talk to you about now is what might come out of that conversation around how to prepare for your death.
Yes.
And I'd love you to tell me, in your opinion, like what are the 5 things that you really should be thinking about in preparation for dying, in getting your will together and so on? What are those sort of 5 important things for planning a funeral?
For planning, I would really encourage people to plan their funeral. There was a survey recently carried out by Dying Matters, the charity in the UK, which showed that 80% of people had not made any sort of provision for their funeral or shared their wishes with anybody. And so if you're presented with this an unfortunate situation where someone's died and you have to arrange the funeral, having something there as a template can be enormously helpful in a difficult time. So I'd really encourage people to do this. I think it's especially important because death is a bit of a blind spot for our society. And as such, it's been kind of relegated to the sidelines to a greater or lesser degree. And one outcome of this is that there's enormous variety in the cost and quality of different funeral directors that you might choose to work with. So also, if there's been no pre-planning done, then it leaves the person looking for the funeral vulnerable to coercion, to being sold things that they don't need, or not getting an appropriate price for something which is really important.
And just to comment on that, I agree with that completely. I mean, I've obviously been through this a couple of times in my life, and you know, you're very vulnerable in those moments, and you are, and these people, of course, are running businesses, and it's hard. But if you just basically know what you want, it's very helpful. We did a survey a couple of weeks ago on this new idea of bio urns. You know, which is where you are cremated and you put them in an urn that has a seed, a plant, a tree in it, so that you can then be planted and turn into a tree. And we had so many women that said that's a great idea. I'm just going to make a note of that. I really think it's fabulous. And you know, I think more and more people now are starting to think of alternatives. I remember Joanna Lumley said something like, just put me in a cardboard box and stick flowers on it. That's okay. You know, and you can express your personality in the way you choose to die, which doesn't sound very much fun, but as you say, it's a good thing for those that are dealing with the funeral.
No, you really can. And there's a new generation of funeral directors, a lot of them who happen to be women, who are getting involved in this field and really transforming it, bringing a load of freshness and creativity. Because, you know, previously the funeral in the UK at least was very off the peg, very similar, you know, Church of England service. And the general attitude was kind of grit your teeth, get through it. You know, batten down the hatches and breathe a big sigh of relief when it's over.
Go have a drink.
Go have a drink and relax and think,
Thank God
Thank the
that's
Lord.
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't
And
have to be like that, though. It can be a celebration.
it can be a
Different.
celebration,
Yeah.
and the potential for a funeral to bring healing and
Yes.
transformation is potentially enormous.
Yeah.
And, people now, as they're looking at death, are finding ways to kind of utilize that
Yeah.
and to harness that as a way to transform grief and invigorate those people who are left behind and celebrate the memory of the person
Yes.
who's
That's
gone.
right.
So I think, thinking about it in advance is kind of crucial to, getting some of those benefits.
Okay, so planning the sort of overall theme of the funeral is one thing, but what specific things, other things, do you think are important for someone to think about?
Okay, well, some people it's quite clearly prescribed the kind of funeral they have. If they belong to a faith community like the Jewish community or the Muslim community in some way,
Yeah,
they're very fortunate because it will be very clear. There'll
yeah,
be a
there's a
clear
structure.
method of, funerals and whatnot, and the community will generally understand that, and there'll be a lot of support
Yes.
around it. If you're not in one of those communities, there's nothing sort of prescribed for you, then there's a very open field and all kinds
Yeah.
of things to choose from. I think it's worth taking time to identify a funeral director that you're comfortable with. And I should say initially that you don't have to use a funeral director at all. That's a completely optional choice. You can care for your loved ones and do everything that needs to be done without any involvement from a funeral director. But having said that, most people, especially if they're unfamiliar with the field, do choose to use a funeral director. As I said, there's enormous variety in cost and quality. And this is my personal opinion. I hope I don't get sued, but I would say keep away from the largest firms because
Yeah, more
there
personal.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're more expensive. There was some benchmarking done by a sort of industry body called SAFE, and they found that Dignity Funerals, which is the second biggest chain, was the most expensive, and Cooperative Funerals, which is the biggest chain, was the second most expensive, and the independent funeral sector was significantly less expensive.
Well, you
No,
expect that with all the marketing they do or the branding. I mean, those things you tend to. But I think you're right that just finding some guidance. Do they actually help you with things like wills and those types of things, or would that be something else? Would that be another thing?
yeah, no, that's something separate. I mean, one issue with death and dying is that the services that people might need are very diverse,
Yes.
and they're also fragmented across
Right.
different sectors, the public sector, the private sector, and the
Right.
voluntary sector as well. So, I mean, it's another thing. Everyone who's dealt with this knows that it takes quite a lot of coordination and effort. And if you can do some of that up front, then it's easier for everyone. So I would say try and find a funeral director that you feel comfortable with. Get quotes. Don't just go to the first one and sign up with them because there's enormous variety in sort of cost. Look at different options for ideas in terms of coffins, for example. You can have the traditional casket. You can have, a standard coffin. You can have cardboard. You can have wicker. You can have shrouds and
The
other
bio urns.
the bio urns and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And in terms of the service, you can think about who you might want to lead that. It could be a faith minister. It could be a humanist celebrant, they call them, which are people who specifically lead funeral services. It could be someone from your community who you
Right.
feel comfortable. What do you want included in the service? What kind of tone should the service have? What kind of music might you want to include? Some people record a message to be played at their own
Yes.
funerals.
Yes.
All these things are really up for consideration, and the funeral belongs to the person who's died and those people who are close to them, and it's really an opportunity for them to take ownership of that and to really wring out every last bit of benefit from it. I'd really encourage people to do that.
I think that that's really an interesting. I mean, obviously, we're talking now about what you would do to think about your funeral in advance of your death. So obviously, you're not unhealthy. When you're not feeling vulnerable is the best time to do these kinds of things and get them out of the way and just plan everything. And I know that there's a lot of groups. Maybe Dying Matters is one of them that has a template that you can actually fill in that says, I want to be buried or cremated. I want to be, I want this music. I want you to play a Tina Turner song for me. I want you to play this recording that I've, video recording even that I've done. And then you just do it, get it done, and then you move on. And do you actually use those templates at all or offer them to people who might be
I mean, there
confused?
is a website on the Dying Matters website. There is something called My Funeral Wishes, which has been developed by with Dying Matters and the National Association of Funeral Directors, which is a good template to use. I'm currently working on an online template, an online form to sort of capture this information, and also. I'm working on. Sorry. One of my other projects, apart from Death Cafe, is called Funeral Advisor, and this is in partnership with an organization called the Natural Death Center, and it's a review site for funeral directors because oftentimes it's hard to distinguish from one to another. Most people, on average, only organize 2 funerals in their lifetime. And this review site offers customer feedback, good and bad, to help people sort the wheat from the chaff and get a funeral that's right for them, because, it really, really matters. And you get one shot. You can't really do it again. So it needs to be right first time.
John, that's really, as you're talking here, I'm thinking, oh my God, like this is so modern. Like we're now doing reputation-based, like we've got TripAdvisor. We're going to have a TripAdvisor for funeral directors. Indeed. But why not? I mean, we are smart consumers now, and we don't want to be taken advantage of. And so women who are watching this, and men, who, this is the time to get control of what you want your funeral to be like, and just, be very precise. Put me in this dress, or let me wear these red shoes, or whatever. And then know where you go for the funeral director that's going to help you.
Yes.
That's great.
100%. That's it.
Yeah, that's great that you're doing that on your website. That's really fantastic. So look, I think this has been super helpful. Hopefully it's been useful to people that are, thinking about dying or thinking about death. It's just everyone has to think about it. And we'll check out your website, deathcafe.com. And wishing you all the best with your project, John. It's fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks.